Human rights commissions are like baby courts or quasi-judicial tribunals. They're not actually run by judges. They don't have the same rigorous civil procedure. For example, hearsay is allowed. There's all sorts of lower standards for evidence. And as you can see, the rulings are quite wacky sometimes. This isn't a joke, though. A $750,000 penalty, a kind of class action lawsuit, again, without the checks and balances of a real class action lawsuit. It's an out of control legal creation. Take it from me. I went through the whole thing about 15 years ago, 20 years ago now in Alberta. Joining us now to talk about this latest case of censorship through a so-called Human Rights Commission is a lawyer for charter advocates working with the Justice Center for Constitutional Freedoms. His name is Hatem Keir. Hatem, nice to meet you. Thanks for joining us today.
Hi, thanks for having me on.
I'm shocked by this case. I'm still trying to wrap my head around it. Let's just confirm the basic facts. What you have here is a former school trustee who was elected to debate these matters and oversee these matters. He obviously was a strong critic of sexual education in the progressive style that is the norm in British Columbia. He apparently used language that was a little bit, I don't know, spicy, as considered by some. And instead of just satisfying themselves with debating him or beating him in an election, they took him before the Human Rights Tribunal, and they got a $750,000 payday. Whether or not they can collect, I don't know. Did I more or less get the facts straight there?
Yeah, you got the main facts that happened. And what's particularly interesting about this case is how the Human Rights Tribunal arrived at its decision. And I think it lends to that point you were raising earlier about the lower standards that are people potentially face when they're before these tribunals.
Well, I mean, they convicted this guy of hate speech. Hate speech and hate crimes are in our criminal code. There's all sorts of checks and balances. One of them, there's various defenses. For example, honest belief, religious belief. You have to prove it beyond a reasonable doubt. These are some of the natural checks and balances when you go to a real grown-up court. But this is a baby court, and they didn't have those same standards, did they? So they just convicted this guy of a hate crime.
Well, even in the context of human rights cases, the Supreme Court has actually been pretty clear about setting a high standard for what hatred means. There's a pretty high-profile case a few years ago with a comedian. There's the Ward case where, again, the Supreme Court reiterated, it's not enough that someone says something offensive. Hatred is a very high bar. It refers to an exceptional kind of speech that caused detestation and vilification of a group of people. And in this case, the British Columbia Human Rights Tribunal did reference that decision and that case law. However, the end result was that the tribunal found that separating the concept of gender identity and biological sex is almost mandatory. So insisting that gender identity is no different from biological sex erases the category of trans people, so says the British Columbia Human Rights Tribunal, and that erasure contributes to the promotion of hatred and what makes Mr. Neufeld's speech hate speech.
So I would put it to you. I mean, listen, we don't know everyone's mind, but you travel in different circles, and people talk about this perhaps in hushed tones a little bit, because were they to stand up in a town hall and announce their views on transgenderism, they might get in some sort of trouble. But I put it to you that most Canadians are challenged by the idea of transgenderism. I think they put up with it if it's a private matter. They say, okay, nobody's business but theirs. But then when it comes into the public square, girls' sports, girls' bathrooms, girls' change room, women's prisons, then all of a sudden, what you just talked about, is there a distinction between a biological sex and a gender identity or gender expression? That's not just a debating point anymore. It's not just an interesting thought experiment. On that question turns whether or not a man can go into a change room with women. And I put it to you that most Canadians, that's my hunch, but I think polls would support it, most Canadians would find that troubling. Are you saying to me that by this human rights tribunal, they're guilty of hate?
Potentially, obviously, every case is going to be assessed on its own merits, but the tribunal was very clear in saying that the statement itself distinguishing uh, biological sex and gender identity is an existential denial of transgender people.
Huh. That word denial, I see it used here and there. I mean, you see denialism used with regards to residential schools, the Kamloops question of are there graves under there? And if you dare take a position, you're called a denier, as if you're, I don't know, a Holocaust denier, or if you're like a flat earther. It's not a legit. I think that word denier or denial, it's loaded. It implies that you're either on our side and correct, or you're on the other side and it's a malicious decision to deny reality. I think there are very few things that should be sacrosanct, and even those immune to debate. I mean, and transgenderism certainly shouldn't be one of it. I feel like the Human Rights Tribunal is too big for its britches. I feel like it wants to be a grown-up court and a legislature all at once. What do you think?
Your point about the implications of the word denial, I think, are really relevant to the way this decision was framed. The tribunal noted that the question of whether transgender people exist and are entitled to dignity in this province is as valuable to ongoing public debate as whether one race is superior to another. So they directly equate this idea, and the implication being that there's no legitimate debate over whether one race is superior to another, and so therefore there really isn't room for ongoing debate as to what it mean, what the implications of being transgender are, or what that means for human gender and sexuality more generally.